Right now, the world is watching the escalating conflict between Israel and Hamas. Each headline brings news of more tension, more conflict, more death. It's a situation that's fraught with historical pain and deep-seated emotions on both sides. But have you ever wondered what fuels this kind of conflict? What if underneath all the politics, there were just some old emotional wounds that make each side, each people, react so strongly when something new occurs? What if we look beyond the surface, beyond the politics and the headlines to understand the deeper emotional dynamics at play? In this video, I'm going to delve into the concept of what I call emotional scabs, and how, much like the individuals that we coach, whole communities, even nations, carry wounds that when you touch them, they reignite pain, not to mention cause quite a bit of conflict. Let's talk about how the principles of emotional wounds and hurts might offer insights into one of the most challenging geopolitical conflicts of our time. I mean, how would we, or how would I as a coach two warring factions, and they've hated each other for almost 100 years? If I'm gonna be effective as their coach, their mediator, I've gotta appreciate this idea of emotional scabs. Emotional scabs shape our reactions, often far more than you might realize. These emotional wounds, emotional scabs, they're like old wounds that haven't fully healed. They're sensitive, they're painful, they can cause intense reactions to seemingly minor triggers. Something happened in the past, and now that client is extra sensitized to anything like that in the present. Emotional scabs make a coaching client react big to small things that remind them of the hurt. In fact, when people say trigger warning, that's quite misleading. Triggers aren't the problem. It's the scab, the wound that someone has that produces that reaction. For instance, have you ever seen a family member or friend fly off the handle over a seemingly tiny issue? Maybe you gave them some minor critique or disagreed with them on something that seemed like it was such small potatoes, but they instantly started yelling at you or attacking you or getting hyper defensive. Why? Well, it wasn't your fault. They had an emotional scab, and you touched that scab. And that's a recipe for immediate pain. They're just expressing the pain that they feel when you touch the scab. Here's an example from a client that I used to work with. This particular client had a very painful relationship with her mother, who was emotionally abusive and hypercritical. Her mother happens to be a very defensive person who is constantly gaslighting the people closest to her, and her daughter was included in that pathological pattern. Even recently, when this client tried to reach her mother and resolve issues from the past, her mother just got defensive and attacked her and told her what a horrible daughter she was. So in a coaching session, this particular client asked me for feedback on something, and I shared some feedback for her. And she blew her top. She got hyper angry, started yelling and screaming about how wrong I was with my feedback. The next session after that, she chastised me and told me how she felt like I didn't care about her and I wasn't listening to her, and that she didn't want to work with me if I was going to be so hypercritical. So I asked her, so you can't take any criticism at all? Wouldn't you expect some amount of constructive criticism from any decent coach? And she immediately slapped back and said, "See, you're doing it again. Stop criticizing me." I literally asked her a question, and she took it as a criticism. Clearly, she had a deep emotional scab around criticism that had nothing to do with me. Now, in retrospect, I could have noticed this more readily and possibly could have saved the coaching relationship. Something I could have transformed had I watched this video, I suppose. So as I just explained, these scabs can be very personal, like a bad breakup or a tough upbringing, but they can also be collective, shared by entire communities or even nations. So let's come back to coaching Israel and Hamas, their conflict. In that conflict, we're not just seeing a political or territorial dispute, we're witnessing the result of deep emotional wounds, scars, scabs, born from a long history of hurt, fear, resentment. It's obvious to most that both sides did some pretty bad things to the other at one point or another. And there's a perpetual argument about who did the worst things, right? But each side carries its own wounds, leading to a cycle of pain and reaction that seems almost impossible to break. Now, it's important to acknowledge that this conflict, like any other political conflict between nations, is complex. It involves more than just emotions. There are historical, political, territorial aspects at play, but at the heart of these, driving the decisions, the responses, and the ongoing conflict are deeply human emotions. These old scabs make current problems feel really upsetting. And of course, they usually predicate less than intelligent or empowering action. I mean, Hamas's deep pain driving a terrorist action to go kill a bunch of kids and civilians, not exactly the most intelligent move, right? But again, it's totally understandable as well, considering those emotional scars. Even though it doesn't excuse those brutal actions of killing innocent people. But nevertheless, the emotional basis for that is there. And if you can't appreciate that as the coach, how could you transform it? So they made a dumb move, probably driven by tremendous pain. And then Israel did what many have judged as a huge overreaction, once again driven by tremendous pain. The scabs, or wounds or scars, led to more reactions and continued the cycle of pain. And the surprising thing isn't that these two groups or any other warring people are brutally killing each other. What's surprising is that these conflicts ever end without everybody dead. So, understanding the emotional scabs, scars, wounds, both personal and collective, is crucial. So while acknowledging that broader context, we gotta get real that emotions are the driving force behind these actions and decisions. Addressing these emotional undercurrents, well, that's the key to breaking a cycle of pain and move towards a somewhat empowering resolution. And that's in the political world, the business world, or the personal world. If you want to change the reaction, fix the scab, not the triggers. By the way, imagine how harmful emotional scabs are in business in terms of productivity, worker engagement, alignment, team harmony, etc. I mean, every day we witness businesses struggling or even falling apart due to nothing but emotional scabs. Turn the scabs around and you turn the business around. So there are a million techniques through which you could help a client overcome their own emotional scab. You could use reframing. I put a video about that in the tag. You could transform your client's state of mind, also a video in the tag. You could also analyze their survival needs and what needs they're meeting and not meeting. There's also a video about that I'm linking to. The bottom line, regardless of the technique that you decide to use, emotions aren't accidental. They don't just fall out of the sky onto people. They're created inside your client. And as such, your client can change those emotions. Even scars, wounds, scabs. So as a coach, it could be part of your job to help your client work through their feelings, whether it's their own feelings or feelings in big group situations. As coaches, our role is to help navigate these emotional landscapes. By understanding and addressing emotional scabs, scars, wounds, we can help individuals and groups move past that pain towards a more empowering future. Appreciate those wounds, transform them, and then watch your client create an entirely new future and new reality. Let me know what you think. Put it in the comment do you think it would even be possible if these warring factions were listening to a coach? That the coach could work through some of those scars and scabs and wounds to the point where it might transform an entire collective people to move past a conflict? How could you use your understanding of these emotional scars or wounds to make a difference for your clients? And if this made a difference, like the video, you can subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.